Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're unpacking one of the absolutely most critical vulnerabilities in all of cybersecurity, OS command injection, and exactly how it escalates into a full-blown reverse shell. We're going to look at the exact mechanics of how blindly trusting user input leads to total system compromise. Think about it. What actually happens when a web application just blindly trusts whatever you type into it? Imagine a super helpful network tool that lets you ping an IP address. How does that basic ping request morph into a devastating vulnerability? Well, that's what we're tackling today. We're going to see exactly how simple input fields can literally become deadly weapons. Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to walk through the complete attack lifecycle today, the anatomy of command injection, hunting vulnerabilities with proxies, executing the exploit, establishing a reverse shell, blind command injection techniques, and finally, mitigation and defense strategies.
All right, first up, anatomy of command injection. Let's understand the threat.
We're taking a real hands-on, lab-based educational approach today. We want to break these complex vulnerabilities down into super practical, understandable steps. Our goal is to dissect exactly how an underlying operating system gets tricked into running malicious commands in the first place.
Now, people get these mixed up a lot. Code injection happens when a malicious payload executes inside the programming language itself, like PHP or Python. But OS command injection, which is what we're focused on today, is a totally different beast. It executes directly in the underlying operating system shell, like bash. And that's a huge deal, because command injection often leads to way more severe privilege escalation. You're basically getting direct access to the host machine.
Take a look at this payload. Imagine a developer writes a PHP script that's just expecting an IP address like localhost, but an attacker adds a single semicolon. It's crazy to think a tiny punctuation mark can completely ruin a company's week, right? But that unescaped semicolon forcefully ends the legitimate ping command and instructs the system shell to immediately execute whatever comes next, which in this case is reading the server's password file. And just like that, the system is breached. Moving on to Section 2, hunting vulnerabilities with proxies. This is our reconnaissance phase.
So, in a live penetration test, precision is everything. Attackers aren't just typing payloads blindly into a web browser. They use web proxies, like Burp Suite. First, they trigger a totally normal action on the app, maybe checking a product stock. Then, they intercept that HTTP request mid-flight, right before it hits the server. This lets them identify vulnerable input fields, like a store ID parameter, and prep it for modification. Which brings us to Section 3, executing the exploit and breaching the perimeter. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact moment of exploitation. The attacker swaps out that normal store ID in the intercepted request with one pipe who am I. That pipe character, it's a Shell Metacharacter. It basically tells the OS, hey, take the output of the first command, which is querying store ID 1, and pipe it directly into the second command, who am I. When the server spits back the name of the active user, the attacker knows for sure they have successfully executed arbitrary code on the host machine.
Next up, Section 4, establishing a reverse shell, or how to gain total system control.
Now, to understand persistent access, we have to define a reverse shell. Normally, you connect to a server, but strict firewalls usually block that inbound traffic. A reverse shell completely flips the script. Think of it like a burglar who wants to bypass a massive locked front door. Instead of trying to break in from the outside, they slip a note under the door, tricking the homeowner into opening it from the inside and walking out to meet them. Since outgoing connections over common TCP ports are usually allowed by firewalls, the server reaches out and connects back to the attacker.
Let's break down exactly how that connection is made over an outbound channel using a netcat payload. The command injected into the vulnerable server is nc-nv, pointing back to the attacker's IP address on port 1337. The attacker already has a listener waiting on that exact port for the callback. And then there's the -e/bin/bash flag. That is the magic key right there. It exposes the target's interactive bash shell directly over that outbound connection. You literally get a live command line on the victim's machine. Let's look at Section 5, blind command injection techniques, and how attackers stay stealthy. So there is a massive difference between a noisy attack and a stealthy one. In a standard injection, if you type "who am I," the web page just literally prints the username right back to you in the HTTP response. It's totally visible. But with a blind injection, the server might execute the command asynchronously or just swallow the output completely. The web page looks totally normal,
So how do you even know if it worked if you can't see the results? Well, you have to use indirect inference. Here are two highly effective blind techniques. The first is time delay. An attacker injects a command like ping-c10 at the local host IP. They aren't looking for text output. They are literally holding a stopwatch. Because the ping command sends 1 packet per second, 10 packets force the server to hang for exactly 9 seconds before sending the HTTP response. If the site takes 9 seconds to load, boom, the exploit worked. The second technique is out-of-band or OOB interaction. By using a command like nslookup with an attacker-controlled domain, they force the vulnerable server to make a DNS request. If the attacker sees that ping pop up in their own DNS logs, the vulnerability is confirmed without the web page ever changing. Finally, Section 6, Mitigation and Defense Strategies. Let's secure that perimeter.
So how do we actually build a comprehensive defense against all of this? First and foremost, never call OS commands directly from your app code if you can avoid it. Just use built-in language APIs instead. If you absolutely must use OS commands, strong input validation, specifically Allowlisting, is absolutely crucial. And notice I didn't just say sanitization. If you rely solely on sanitizing metacharacters like semicolons or pipes, you might easily miss something subtle, like a hidden carriage return character, and you're still exposed. Lastly, enforce the principle of least privilege. Contain the blast radius, so even if a web application is compromised, it doesn't yield root access to the entire server.
I want to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. Are your web applications leaving the front door locked, but the back door wide open? Because you can have the most expensive firewalls in the world blocking inbound traffic, but if one simple input field allows an attacker to inject an OS command and spin up an outbound reverse shell, they bypass the whole shebang. It's an incredibly dangerous threat, and it requires strict validation and vigilant architecture to prevent. Take this knowledge, audit your own systems, and make absolutely sure that back door is bolted shut. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.